Good day, everyone. When you build something that generates billions of dollars, people assume your goal is to pass it all down, that one day your children will inherit the empire and live like royalty. But that assumption misunderstands what wealth is really for. It's not a monument to a family name, it's a tool, and tools are meant to build something far greater than comfort. People often misunderstand what wealth really is. They think of it as a finish line, a scoreboard, or a status symbol, but it was never meant to be any of those things. Wealth is not the end goal. It's not something to hang on a wall or lock in a vault to prove something to the world. It's a tool, nothing more, nothing less, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how you use it. When I was young and just starting out, the goal wasn't to get rich. The goal was to build something that mattered, to solve problems, to take risks, to innovate in ways that could help people live and work better. And as things grew, the numbers got bigger, yes, but the mission stayed the same. Wealth came as a byproduct of value creation, not as the purpose. That distinction matters, because when you begin to think of money as the reason rather than the result, you start to make very different decisions, ones that often miss the bigger picture. Wealth is powerful, but it doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't tell you what to do with it, who to become, or what problems are most worth solving. You have to decide that for yourself, and the choices you make with it. Those are what define your legacy. Not the size of your bank account, but the shape of your impact. Some people accumulate wealth just to protect it. They want security, they want admiration, they want control. But hoarding wealth doesn't make you stronger or wiser. It just makes your world smaller. It builds walls instead of bridges. It limits your curiosity. It quiets the questions that used to drive you. What can we fix? What can we improve? What can we imagine? A better use of wealth is to deploy it, to put it to work in places that need it most. In education, in health, in science, in equity, in sustainability. That's where wealth stops being a number and starts being a force. When you channel it toward reducing suffering, increasing opportunity, and creating systems that benefit more than just yourself, you realize it was never really yours to begin with. You were just a temporary steward, a trustee of something bigger than you. That's not always an easy mindset to adopt, especially when the world celebrates the accumulation of wealth more than its distribution. Success stories are measured in billions, headlines focus on rankings, and admiration is often reserved for those who hold the most, not those who give the most. But that version of success is shallow. It doesn't last, it doesn't inspire. Real success is building things that outlive you, ideas that keep working even when you're gone, opportunities that multiply, solutions that spread. The real value of wealth isn't in preserving it, it's in pushing it forward, letting it move, adapt, evolve, letting it flow into places that have been overlooked or underserved. That's where transformation happens. I've seen firsthand how a single investment in the right idea or person can create exponential change. It can spark new inventions, create jobs, lift entire communities, but only if you're willing to see wealth as something fluid, not fixed, dynamic, not static, a resource meant to be shared, not hoarded. And that goes beyond money. It's also about your time, your energy, your knowledge, your networks. All of those things are forms of wealth, and they too can be used as tools. They can build partnerships, unlock breakthroughs, and open doors for others. It's never just about how much you have. It's always about how you use what you've been given. I believe we're at a point where this kind of thinking is more important than ever. The challenges ahead, climate, inequality, health crises, misinformation aren't going to be solved by clinging to what we already have. They're going to be solved by directing our tools toward solutions, by investing in people and ideas that can move us forward together. So no, wealth is not a trophy. It's not something to shine and show off. It's a lever, a bridge, a hammer, And whether you build a shelter, a school, a company, or a curate all depends on the hands that hold it and the intention behind them. That's the real responsibility of having it, and the real opportunity. There's a widely held belief that giving your children billions of dollars is the ultimate gesture of love, that if you've built extraordinary wealth, the most natural and noble thing to do is pass it down in full. But that assumption overlooks something critical. Leaving billions behind isn't always a favor. In many cases, it can do more harm than good, not because wealth is bad, but because ease without effort can quietly strip away drive, curiosity, and meaning. When you grow up with nothing guaranteed, you have no choice but to figure things out. You learn to solve problems. You discover what you care about, what you're willing to struggle for, and what you're capable of achieving. You experience failure and realize it doesn't break you. Those early challenges aren't obstacles. They're the foundation. They teach you to think independently, to adapt, and to build something from the ground up. That process matters far more than any amount of money ever will. Now imagine growing up without that process, everything already paid for, every risk already covered, every need already met. It sounds like a dream, but too often it becomes a trap. Because when everything is taken care of, very little needs to be discovered. And when discovery is missing, purpose is too. That's the danger of unearned abundance. It can create comfort that turns into complacency. It can replace drive with dependency. Children born into wealth face a unique challenge. They live in a world of privilege, but they still need to develop the resilience, grit, and clarity that come from doing hard things. If you hand them billions, you may unintentionally remove the very struggles that shape character. You may rob them of their story before they've even started writing it. Of course, giving nothing at all isn't the answer either. It's about balance. It's about providing enough to explore and grow, but not so much that there's no reason to strive, enough to build, not coast, enough to experiment, not escape. That kind of support respects both their potential and their responsibility. It says, I believe in what you can do, not just what I can give. People sometimes confuse inheritance with love, as if the more you leave, the more you care. But real love is preparing someone to thrive on their own. It's trusting them to find their own path and equipping them to walk it. That might mean funding their education, supporting their first venture, or offering mentorship. But it also means standing back and letting them fail, recover, and grow stronger. There's also the larger question, what is wealth for? Is it simply a family resource, or can it serve a broader purpose? When you've been fortunate enough to accumulate billions, that fortune exists in a world filled with urgent problems: disease, poverty, climate change, inequality. What message does it send if you choose to concentrate that wealth in a few private bank accounts rather than investing it in solutions that could lift millions? The world doesn't need more billionaires' children living effortlessly. It needs more problem solvers, more scientists, educators, builders, and thinkers. And if your children are among them, let it be because they earned their place, not because it was guaranteed by a trust fund. Give them the tools, not the finish line. Show them what wealth can do, not just what it can buy. And most importantly, model the kind of values you hope they'll carry forward: integrity, empathy, discipline. Purpose, those things can't be inherited in a will. They're passed down through action, not assets, through conversations, not contracts. So no, leaving billions behind isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's the beginning of a slow erosion of ambition and identity. The real gift isn't money, it's meaning. The chance to live a life of substance, to pursue work that matters, and to wake up every day knowing that who you are wasn't handed to you, but built with your own two hands. Wealth, when used wisely, can create opportunity, heal wounds, and fuel progress. but when it's given without thought, it can become a weight, silent, invisible, and heavy. That's not a legacy worth leaving. What's worth leaving is the example of using your resources to do good, and the belief that each generation should stand on its own feet, not on a pile of inherited money, but on a foundation of earned strength. There's something far more powerful than giving someone wealth, and that's giving them the tools to create their own. At every stage of life, education remains the most important investment we can make, not just in institutions, but in people. Because money without knowledge rarely lasts, but knowledge, once gained, has the power to multiply itself across generations, across industries, and across entire societies. That's why, when given the choice between education and entitlement, the decision should always be clear. Entitlement is easy to give. It's packaged in comfort, guaranteed outcomes, and soft landings. It protects from failure, shields from discomfort, and creates the illusion of progress even when none is being made. But that protection often comes at a steep cost. When people begin to expect outcomes instead of earning them, they lose the hunger that drives innovation. They forget how to struggle productively, and eventually they forget what they're capable of achieving on their own. Education, on the other hand, requires effort. It's not always glamorous. It doesn't guarantee immediate rewards, but it builds something inside you that can never be taken away. It shapes your thinking, expands your perspective, and prepares you to adapt in a world that doesn't stand still. The benefits aren't always visible in the short term, but over a lifetime, there's no comparison. When you educate someone, you don't just improve their circumstances, you increase their agency. You hand them the power to question, to analyze, to solve. You give them the ability to navigate complexity and contribute meaningfully. That kind of capability can't be inherited. It must be earned, and no amount of inheritance will ever replace the value of a sharp, curious, and trained mind. It's tempting to believe that love is shown through gifts, through safety nets, through making life easier. But the deepest form of love is believing someone is strong enough to do hard things. It's saying, I won't pave the road for you, but I'll make sure you know how to read the map. That's what education does. It prepares people not for a single destination, but for a life filled with choices. Entitlement often leads to stagnation. It rewards the status quo. It breeds a quiet complacency that's hard to detect but easy to fall into. Education, by contrast, pushes forward. It challenges assumptions. It questions authority. It drives improvement. And most importantly, it builds resilience. When you know how to learn, you're never truly stuck. You can pivot, rebuild, start over because your strength doesn't come from what you've been handed, but from what you've built. That's why, even for those born into privilege, the emphasis should always be on education. Not just formal degrees, but real world learning, critical thinking, exposure to different cultures, disciplines, and perspectives. The world is changing fast. Technology, climate, geopolitics. None of these are standing still. If you don't equip people with the ability to think and learn continuously, it doesn't matter how much they start with. Eventually, the world will move on without them. There's also a moral dimension to this. Entitlement trains people to believe they deserve more simply because of where they started. Education teaches that what you contribute is what counts. It levels the playing field in a way that money alone never can. It reminds us that genius can come from anywhere, and that potential is universal, even if opportunity is not. So the goal should never be to create more entitled individuals. The goal should be to foster educated ones. Curious ones, people who see problems and move toward them, people who understand systems, who listen deeply, who build bridges where others see walls. That kind of mindset is what changes the world. And no trust fund, no safety net, no lifetime of luxury can substitute for that. Ultimately, the most valuable thing you can give anyone isn't a lifestyle, it's a foundation, a mindset, a framework for understanding the world and their place in it. That's what education delivers, not answers, but the tools to find them, not shortcuts, but the confidence to take the long road. In the end, the difference between entitlement and education is simple. One says you're owed this, the other says you're capable of this, and that makes all the difference. There comes a point when you have more than you could ever possibly need, more money, more resources, more influence than any one person or family can reasonably use. And when that happens, the question shifts. It's no longer about what you can acquire, it's about what you can change. That's where philanthropy becomes not just an option, but a responsibility, not a side project, but a legacy. The idea of legacy is often tied to buildings, companies, books, or institutions. But the most meaningful legacy isn't found in what has your name on it. It's found in the lives that were made better because of your actions. In the diseases that were cured, in the students who got to stay in school, in the communities that gained access to clean water or reliable electricity. These are the kinds of outcomes that matter most. They endure, they echo. Philanthropy isn't about giving back just to balance some moral scale. It's about recognizing that if you're in a position to help, you should. Not because you're a hero, but because you're a participant in a larger system. One that has given you advantages others never had, one that, if left unchanged, will keep producing those same imbalances over and over again. Philanthropy is a way to interrupt that cycle, to move resources from where they are abundant to where they are desperately needed. It's easy to be comfortable with success and forget how fragile opportunity can be. It's easy to enjoy the benefits of a good education, stable infrastructure, or strong institutions, and overlook the fact that those things don't exist everywhere. But they should. Talent is universal, opportunity is not. That's what philanthropy tries to correct, not with handouts, but with systems that empower, with tools that let people build better lives, not just for themselves, but for others around them. The scale of modern challenges requires more than just government or private industry. It needs people who are willing to take risks with their giving, who are willing to fund what others won't, who are driven not by returns, but by results. Philanthropy lets you support ideas that are too bold for the market and too urgent to wait for policy. It lets you invest in breakthroughs before they're profitable, in people before they're famous, in problems before they're popular. It also teaches humility, because when you step into fields like global health, education, or climate resilience, you realize how complex the world really is. You meet scientists, teachers, farmers, and frontline workers who understand the intricacies in ways you never will. Philanthropy isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening, learning, and amplifying the efforts of those already doing the hard work. It's not a spotlight, it's a platform. There's something deeply human about wanting to make a difference that outlasts you, not in a grandiose way, but in a practical, honest one. Philanthropy makes that possible. It transforms wealth into vaccines, textbooks, solar panels, clean drinking water, into startup capital for a woman in a rural village, into data for a researcher trying to stop the next pandemic. It becomes the fuel for ideas that wouldn't have made it without a little help. And perhaps most importantly, it creates a culture of giving. It signals to the next generation that success isn't just measured by what you accumulate, it's measured by what you unlock in others. That wealth, when used intentionally, can do more than just build comfort. It can build courage, connection, and hope. It can show young people that being smart, ambitious, and fortunate also means being generous and responsible. You don't get to choose your legacy after you're gone. You shape it while you're here in the choices you make, in the priorities you set, in the lives you touch. Philanthropy isn't a substitute for hard work or innovation. It's an extension of them. A continuation of the same drive that built something valuable, now redirected to build something meaningful. The impact of philanthropy isn't always immediate. It doesn't always show up in headlines or stock charts, but it shows up in healthier communities, better schools, longer lives, and more just societies. And over time, those results speak louder than any fortune ever could. That's the kind of legacy worth aiming for, not just being remembered, but having truly mattered. There's a misconception that success means having no limits, that the ultimate goal is total freedom, freedom to spend, to expand, to acquire without boundaries. But the truth is, limits, when chosen with purpose, aren't a constraint, they're a compass. They help you stay aligned with what really matters, because when everything is possible, it's easy to get lost in what doesn't need to be done. Purposeful limits are what keep ambition tethered to values. The world keeps telling us to go bigger, more investments, more influence, more reach, but unchecked expansion doesn't always lead to progress. In fact, it can dilute focus, spread energy thin, replace thoughtful impact with broad, superficial gestures. If you try to do everything, you risk doing nothing well. But if you set meaningful limit on where you spend your time, your capital, your energy, you create space for real depth, real change. Limits force prioritization, and prioritization is the first step to impact. Whether it's deciding which problems to solve, which projects to scale, or which partnerships to pursue, the act of saying no is often more powerful than saying yes. Not because you lack capacity, but because you respect it, because you know that every hour, every dollar, every decision has opportunity cost, and when you impose limits, you're not closing doors, you're choosing which ones to walk through with purpose. One of the most overlooked truths about discipline is that it enables freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to do the right things without distraction. Limits create structure, and structure creates momentum. It's like writing code. You don't try to solve every problem in one block. You build modules, test logic, and move in iterations. The constraints are what make the system work. Even with wealth, the idea that more is always better quickly breaks down. After a certain point, accumulating more doesn't change your quality of life, but what you do with it can change the quality of someone else's. Setting limits on personal consumption, for example, isn't about deprivation. It's about intention. It's about recognizing that luxury for the sake of luxury rarely satisfies, and that value is found more often in contribution than in possession. There's also a moral aspect to limits. In a world with finite resources and infinite needs, not everything you can do should be done. Power and privilege demand guardrails. Just because you can build something doesn't mean it's the best use of your platform. Just because you can dominate a space doesn't mean it's wise or fair. Purposeful limits keep power from becoming blind. They invite accountability, reflection, and collaboration. That principle applies to leadership as well, knowing when to step back, when to listen, when to let others lead. These are all forms of restraint that multiply effectiveness. The best leaders aren't the ones who assert control at every turn. They're the ones who know which decisions to delegate, which conversations to elevate, and when to stay silent so others can speak. Their strength comes not from being everywhere, but from knowing exactly where they can make the greatest difference. Limits also apply to ambition, not in the sense of lowering your standards, but in focusing your ambition on problems worth solving. It's easy to chase metrics, status, or recognition, but those pursuits often lack depth. A purposeful life isn't about constant escalation. It's about alignment. About waking up each day knowing that your efforts are pointed at something meaningful, even if it's not the flashiest or most celebrated. Technology has made it possible to scale faster than ever before. That's a gift, but also a temptation. Not everything needs to go global. Not every idea needs to reach everyone. Some problems are local, nuanced, and slow. Purposeful limits help you stay grounded in context. They remind you to respect complexity, to listen before solving, to build for real humans, not just markets. In the end, limits are not about scarcity, they are about direction. They protect the integrity of your goals. They keep your efforts concentrated. They help you measure success not by how far you went, but by how close you stayed to what you believed in. That's how meaningful progress happens, not through endless expansion, but through focused, disciplined intention. A meaningful life isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things deeply and well, and that starts with knowing your limits, not as lines you can't cross, but as choices you've made to keep your actions aligned with your values. That's where purpose lives. That's where impact begins. At the end of the day, it's not about how much you leave behind for your kids. It's about how much you leave in them: courage, curiosity, compassion. Those are the true inheritances. Everything else is just numbers, and numbers, in the end, don't change the world. People do.